Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information. What does a good retirement look like? If you ask me, it's probably, financially speaking anyway, having some money to provide for yourself, but also having a plan so you know that your money is used correctly. This is episode 5 of our retirement mini-series. It's here on the Australian Investors Podcast, and as always, joined by Drew Meredith, financial advisor, retirement wealth specialist, the guy behind this mug, Wattle Partners, along with Jamie Nemsis and the team, and this book with Jamie Nemsis, The Golden Years. Drew Meredith, welcome to episode 5 of the retirement series.
Good to be here, as always.
It is very good. If you're just tuning in, you're starting at the end, which is not a bad thing because we're going to talk about things like philanthropy.
The end. We're going to talk about the end.
We're going to talk about the end, to be honest, a bit, and what it means to have superannuation, how to manage money for the next generation, these types of things. Please go back and listen to episodes 1 through 4 as well. You don't need to listen to them in any type of order, but it would be really beneficial, maybe not for you, maybe for your family, your kids, that type of a thing. So in episode 5, Drew, I'm going to kick things off with this idea of estate planning. Estate planning. Some people have heard of this throughout their life, and I hope everyone listening to this has at least considered if they should have a will. My last will and testament, I have a will. My wife has a will. Talk to us about what is estate planning. As a financial advisor, you come across this a lot, no doubt.
Yeah, so if there's 5 sections of a statement of advice and a financial plan we do, estate planning is a big part of them. And estate planning is essentially how do you pass all your accumulated assets and liabilities to the next generation or to your spouse and leave something for your partner. Mm-hmm. It is wide-ranging. So the things most people know about it's got its own chapter in the book. I found that the most exciting one to read. I think that we kind of talked about a movie at the beginning. Yep. But when you're talking about estate planning, everyone knows about a will. What people don't know about is some assets are included in the will and some assets aren't. But a will is essentially setting the terms for which your assets will be passed or shared between your family and beneficiaries. But that extends a lot. So for most people, their biggest assets are their home, which would be part of the will, mm-hmm. and then their superannuation balance. Your superannuation is a non-estate asset, so that needs to be dealt with separately. It can be pushed into the will, but it needs to be specifically dealt with outside of your wills. And then in addition to estate planning, estate planning is what happens when you pass. There's probably more impactful things can happen while you're still alive. So if you're unable to make decisions, if there's medical emergencies that happen, that's where things like powers of attorney come in, whether that's a medical power of attorney or a financial power of attorney. Mm-hmm. All of those form part of this estate planning story. And I think the part of any good financial plan should be thinking about what happens if things go wrong. Yep. And it's a big part of every discussion. In fact, we probably have more, I think we've said in the past, some of our meetings with clients, we do 90% about them, 10% about investments. A lot of our longer meetings now are actually about estate planning, involving multiple generations in that discussion and outlining the options that they have available.
Okay. So let's imagine a hypothetical character. Let's say his name is Dr. Andrew Derrimouth, and he walks into the Wattle Partners office.
Suggests he doesn't have many assets.
He does have quite a few assets. So he's got his house. He's got a brick house because he's concerned about safety, but also because he has been a diligent saver. He's got $600,000. Yep. Now the good doctor has just figured out that he's ill, right? And he's thinking about estate planning now. So if he passes away and he's got $500,000 in super and he's got his home. He might have some cash and that type of stuff just lying around, knowing him. Yeah. You're saying that the will would deal with the house and the cash, that type of a thing.
Generally, yep.
But it wouldn't impact what's happening in super. He has to set that up separately such that super would be paid to his estate. Is that correct?
Is an option, yeah. So as a non-estate asset, the payment of superannuation is determined by the trustees. If it's an Australian super, it's Australian super trustee. If it's an SMSF, it's yourself or your surviving partner or your children if they're in the fund as the trustee who determines it. They have the super law has a limited number of beneficiaries who they can pay your superannuation to, but it is ultimately up to them. You can bind them to who, and that's what we're talking about, you can bind who they can pay that to via what's called a binding death benefit nomination.
Yep.
And that can be to a spouse, a child, or to what, and people think it's to your estate, but you actually have to say your legal personal representative, which is the executor of your estate, executor of your will, and that would direct the assets to your will and then be treated under the clauses of your will.
So what you're saying, let's just get in the details here. So
I thought that was detailed.
So if I was, if the good doctor in this instance, Dr. Andrew Derrimouth, had his super fund, he would make a binding nomination to whoever he's appointed as his executor of his will.
Yeah, or just to the legal personal representative.
To the legal
as a
personal representative.
Yep.
Okay, cool. And as a financial planner, you can help people navigate who's who in the zoo here, like if they need
and who you can pay to, who you can't pay to,
and you would connect them with a lawyer if they needed legal advice as well.
There is some strategy around. So if it's a pension, that pension can be set up as being reversionary and automatically continuing to the other partner. That often is the surviving partner, which gives you flexibility on strategy, or it can be a lump sum payment under a binding death benefit nomination.
So if Mrs. Derrimouth, Mrs. Andrea Derrimouth was surviving in this instance, she potentially could receive his pension.
She could continue receiving his pension.
So they wouldn't have to collapse the super fund and do all that sort of stuff. It would just continue to
And if she was over the cap, then she could actually push her pension back into accumulation and keep that money in superannuation for as long as possible.
It's really, really interesting, particularly for Andrew. So that was actually my question 22 is what happens to super when you die? Well, we've covered that. But
death is generally a compulsory cashing event, which means it has to be paid out of super in some way.
Okay. But even with that reversionary thing?
Not if it's a reversionary pension. That's basically the only way you keep it from happening.
Okay. And then,
you can't pay your super
I had a part B to this question.
Yeah.
Question 22 in our series. So how do I avoid certain people getting their hands on my super?
Who are certain people is my first question.
Well, it could be an ex-wife, an estranged child, insert whatever.
The most, the key way is by having a non-lapsing binding death benefit nomination directly to your estate.
Non-lapsing?
Yeah, which means most binding death nominations lapse every 3 years.
Yeah.
So you have to, or making sure that nomination is in place and it's valid. It's got the legal personal representative or it's got the person and all their appropriate details, and that form is perfect because it could be challenged in court. So making sure it's completed properly, and that's the surefire way, as well as having, where there's been some very rare cases where one child, so the couple has 2 children, but only one child is a member of the super fund. They become the trustee and they decide to pay it to themselves outside of the will. So that's another one, which is either don't include your children, or if you do, include all your children in an SMSF, that is.
Yep. Okay. And a non-lapsing binding nomination.
Yeah.
Is that different? Is that something?
Can depend on so a lot of superannuation and these things are determined by the trust deed, and Australian Super has a deed.
Yeah, I don't think they allow non-lapsing, do they? Or
no, most of them.
3 years.
But under SMSF deeds, you can usually get a non-lapsing nomination that continue. If not, make sure you review it every 3 years, or your advisor should review it every 3 years to make sure it's up to date and shown in your tax return.
In episode 4, which was the last one that we did, that comes right before 5, we talked about how that you would suggesting that people who had a super fund could pull money out in certain circumstances and recontribute to a partner or recontribute for themselves. And it was effectively not dirtying the money. It was like cleaning the money behind the scenes, like taxable components, non-taxable components. If you don't know what we're talking about, don't worry about it. Well, do worry about it. Speak to your advisor. But we were talking about how money could be effectively future-proof so that in the future, you could give that money to your next of kin or whatever the case may be, whoever it's going to, in a way that is tax effective or even not tax effective, like just legally effective in the sense of it protects people, it's blah, 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 blah. A lot of people, Drew, start thinking about gifting money before they die.
Yeah.
They have a big balance. They want to support their kids. They want to support something, a charity, a friend, a family member. Can people gift money? If so, what is gifting?
Giving money.
Okay. Where do I start?
I think gifting, then there's different options or considerations on this. One is gifting, if you're an age pension recipient, can be penalised, and you can't give away money to get more of an age pension. So that's one thing to kind of have in your mind.
And there's a few year clawback on that.
Exactly.
So you can't just be like,
you can do up to 10,000 a year, and I think 50,000 over 3 years or something like that, and not be penalised.
Yep.
But making sure, and gifting in general, we see it all the time. I think what you want to be wary of, and there's, to my understanding, there's no tax implications of gifting outside of age pension. I think what you want to be mindful of is gifting. If you're gifting significant amounts and you're gifting it to friends and family, do you want to have protection on that? Like if you're giving $200,000 for a deposit on a house, and that relationship breaks down, do you want to have control or the ability to bring those funds back?
Give them a loan.
Exactly. And then if it's gifting, then it becomes a loan agreement. You probably want to put a loan agreement in place and get legal advice on those things. But it's fairly straightforward. I think one big thing for us is a lot of clients turn to us and ask us if it's appropriate to gift a certain amount or can we afford to do it. Generally the case with the clients we work with is yes, but it's asking those questions. Do you intend it back? Are there any all those sort of the context of it.
Yeah. Also, what would be quite popular for parents to think about is like maybe you want to help little Jeff get his own house, and maybe he's not little, maybe he's big Jeff now, but you want to help Jeff get a house.
Yeah.
But then Stacey, who's your other kid, feels like you just helped him, but you didn't help me, and it can create tension in the family.
Happens all the time.
So considering how maybe you can equalise that, how those relationships may be impacted.
And that's what a good estate plan can do as well, which is give consideration to that. And it might be any existing loans. That's why gifting and having a spreadsheet of what's been paid can be valuable. And you can have a clause in your will that says, giving consideration to the $400,000 loan I provided to Stacey, or not to Stacey,
Jeff.
And Jeff, that the will be rebalanced to take that into consideration, or the estate will be.
Never forget the kids' names, Drew.
You can mistake them very easily. I always do that. You can't understand when your parents do to you all the time. But you get it. You're like, oh, it's because they're old. No, you just do it.
They'll get there. They'll just keep going through the list of kids until they get to you. Yeah, bingo. Philanthropy. The idea of giving money to charity or giving money to someone or some cause is really important to a lot of people. I deal with this personally with people that come to me for advice and wisdom on how to gift effectively to charities, to set up things. One of the things that a lot of people talk about is this idea of a PAF, P-A-F.
Private Ancillary Fund.
A private ancillary fund. You may have heard of things called like a charitable trust. Some people may want to help a cause. We've had Professor Peter Singer on the Rask Network quite a few times, a wonderful person who started the animal rights movement, but also created something called The Life You Can Save, which is a charity set up to assess other charities. And also you can make a donation straight to them. The Life You Can Save is the website, lifeyoucansave.org. And through them, you can make a donation to effective charities that are effective in the way they give to the communities. But you can also set up different things, right, Drew? And one of those things that people explore is something called a private ancillary fund. This is typically for people with larger balances, like $1 million or more that they want to give away. I've been through this process. Can you tell us what a PAF is, or just how people can give in this way?
It's a private charity. It can be established. I believe you get a tax return for a tax refund or tax deduction for donating to it. Mm-hmm. But essentially it's a feeder mechanism through which you have to, similar to a super fund, you have to pay out at least 5% of the balance every year. And that can only be paid to true charity. So those with
have to be registered.
DGR, I think it's DGR 2 or DGR 1 and 2 status, which means you can only pay from that charity into other charities. It can accept some small donations from, I think, up to a certain level from external parties. And it's generally a way of a family leaving a legacy and supporting. So we are on the board of the Greenlight Foundation, and that charity seeks to support disadvantaged children and provide them opportunity through education. So we've donated to charities that help build schools in not Tanzania and in Humla, so outside of Nepal. So sometimes if there's significant assets, you might set that up and it has its own restrictions around it. And generally, you don't pay yourself out of it. It's not like one of those, I know, charitable foundations
Yeah,
like you hear about in the US.
It's not one of those weird ones from the US where there's some sort of
you put all your whole
tax element to this.
4,000 acres into the...
Yeah, and we saw about it like with the universities and that type of stuff that seemed to be a bit odd recently in the news. So it's not that. This is very well regulated, this PAF thing.
So the client had a big inheritance essentially, and they decided to put a portion into this and have their children involved with it over multiple generations to keep them together.
There are things that are set up through your will or as an adjacent to your will, like on the triggering of your will.
Donations to these parties.
Which can happen as well. There's also things that people might consider, which are really simple, which is you have an investment company and that company effectively just keeps living after your death. And you set it up in such a way that it's whoever you put in charge of that company is responsible for being a steward and paying the income and
control of that can pass through your will as well.
Yeah.
Directorships and shareholdings.
Yeah. And those are pretty common too. It's a very simple way to do it. Obviously, there are pros and cons to having a company structure over a PAF, over a charitable trust, over this or that. That's where a good lawyer can also support your financial planner and your financial planner can connect you. So this is very, very common and it's going to be more common as more wealth transfers throughout the next 3 or 4 decades. Not only will families of medium means and high means look for different things, but they will also let me clarify what I mean. They will be looking to give money to their kids and their grandkids and probably their sporting clubs and their debating clubs and their scouts hall and that sort of stuff. But they will also look to create things that are
outlast them as well.
That will just live forever.
It's like trusts and companies. A trust is an 80-year entity.
Yeah.
It's a family trust. So it's a way that, and if the restrictions on super increase, then more people use trusts and companies. Yeah.
I actually, we get approached quite a bit about this and I actually am very passionate about it and don't be surprised to see if Rask do something in this space over the next 5 years. We've had it put to us in a few ways that people want to give back. They just don't have anyone to give back to. And so obviously we do it through financial literacy and we support all of that and do that for free, over 27,000 students now. So don't be surprised to see us try and create something that allows people to give money to, and then we just steward that for decades to come. That's another thing entirely. My final question is for the 70-year-olds in the room. You could be 71. You could be 79. I'll still call you 70. You're still young to me. In your 70s, Drew, what are the things that people should be thinking about to not so much help them prepare, although maybe they are thinking, what can I do to prepare for my retirement? But also, what can I do to help me in retirement over the next 12 months? Yeah. Give us a bit of this is what's available in the book, by the way. When you go to the back of the chapter, there's action
50,
points.
60, 70. You're doing a test. You're going to check what I said in there. Change it up.
There's 3 or 4 points at the back of every chapter that tell you what you should do based on everything you just read. And yes, I'm holding the book upside down and in reverse. There you go. If I'm in my 70s, next 12 months, listening to this, watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the series, of course, and left us a kind review, what would you do?
I think we've covered a lot of these before. So one last one would be if you have any other assets, you're getting up to when you can't contribute anymore. So you can't contribute once you hit 75. So is there anything we can throw in at the end? Have you drawn more than you need to and you've got savings? We can put that back into super. And then just as we started in this episode, I think that one of the big areas in your 70s is starting to make sure your binding death benefit nominations are in place. Not saying you're going to die soon, but make sure they're in place. But also, it's probably about time to review the trust deed. If you're in an SMSF, review the deed of your super fund. Make sure it still allows you to do non-lapsing and all these options, and set you up for the next 10 years, not just the next 12 months.
Well, in the book, you said at the end of the chapter, chapter 5, on page 72, you said, track down the original copies of your wills and powers of attorney, if you have them. Powers of attorney are different to wills. Keep that in mind. Very important. They don't have to cost you much either. If you don't, contact a solicitor or financial advisor as a matter of urgency, Drew goes on to say, with Jamie chiming in. On a single page, write down who you wish to receive each of your assets, including anyone who you think may need some sort of additional support. This is a very important point, actually, for people with disabled children. Very, very important. If you've got kids that are disabled or may need extra care in the future, definitely speak to a financial advisor. Number 3, contact your superannuation fund or accountant for SMSF owners and ask for a copy of your binding death benefit nominations. Very similar to what you just said. So that is the Golden Years book. Well done, mate. So we have covered in 5 episodes, 25 questions, in brackets about 55 questions, all on retirement, whether you're getting started, you're doing it, or you're already well and truly in the rhythm of it. We are huge advocates, and I'm not just saying this because there's a financial advisor in the room, but financial planning for retirement is essential, in my opinion. We just heard about one of the things with an SMSF or the different contribution or recontribution or not strategies or estate planning. Get financial advice. Seriously, it is worth the money. You can find financial planners. This is the very first question in this 5-part series. You can find a financial planner by going to the moneysmart.gov.au website, and you can search for financial advisors. Always, always, always make sure that they operate on that register and they have their unique number, as Drew said, 8-digit number. Financial services license is what they need. If they don't have one of those, they are not qualified to give you advice. Alternatively, you can head to the link in the video or in the podcast that says financial planning. You can get matched with a financial planner that we work with here, such as Wattle Partners. And whatever you do, take some of the tidbits away from this episode. Take this list of 25 and use it to have better conversations with your financial professional, your accountant, your planner, your lawyer. Use this list, inform yourself. The Drew's book was $32. I think I'll put a link. I'll make a note of this.
20% discount. Probably.
Yeah, 20% discount link. I put in the show notes for Drew's book. Drew and Jamie's. I always keep saying Drew, but Jamie did most of the work. Go and grab a copy of the book. It's good reading, particularly at the end of financial year. Drew, this is always a bit of fun. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
It's good to be here, as always. I've got a bit of a final retirement dad joke. If you want to
here we go.
I thought I'd sneak one in there.
Drew's dad joke. Okay, we cannot have an episode of this podcast without a joke.
How can you tell you're getting old?
We talk about retirement?
Yeah. You go to an antique auction, 3 people bid on you.
What a way to end the show. Write your criticisms and concerns, care of Drew at Wattle Partners. But seriously, mate, it's always good to talk about this. An area of finance that not enough financial advisors are out publicly talking about. So you and Jamie do a great job of that and getting people in the community to be activated and actually seek advice around a really important time. So thanks for taking the time out.
Good to see you.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.